All right, hello. Thank you for joining us today. We are here to talk about a very important topic, vaping. My name is Meg Crace. I'm the Social Service Coordinator for the Carpentersville Police Department. I'm joined today by Jessica Reed, who's a Prevention Specialist for the RUN Center. Jessica has a wealth of knowledge regarding all aspects of addiction, but today we're going to focus on vaping. Thank you for joining us, Jessica.
Thank you for having me. So as Meg said, my name is Jessica Reed. I'm one of the prevention specialists at RUN's Addiction Counseling Center located in Elgin. And today we're going to talk about electronic cigarettes or vaping or e-cigs or Juuls. They kind of go by a lot of different names, but the technical term is electronic cigarettes. So we'll go through some statistics, some data, and then how to talk to your students about it. So to begin with, we're going to start with this chart. It shows all of the different tobacco product use among U.S. high school students. So as you can see, most of them are on the decline or at least holding steady. Cigarette use is way down. In 2018, it was only 8.1% of high school students were using. However, you can see e-cigarette use has increased a ton. This is partially due to e-cigarettes coming on the market in 2013, where you can see that big jump. In 2016, it went down a little bit. The FDA started regulating them a little bit. We'll talk more about that towards the end of the presentation. But then they've been growing and increasing since, and they're probably a little bit higher now in 2020, but we're still waiting for the current up-to-date data for that. E-cigarettes or vaping come in a lot of different sizes and shapes. The traditional ones were the e-pipes and e-cigarettes, the disposable ones, and then the e-cigars. There's the larger tank devices, which are typical of adult e-cigarette users. The medium ones and then the rechargeable ones are the ones that are most popular among the youth. The rechargeable ones, those are the ones that are like the Juuls. That's one of the brand names for it. And so that's pretty typical of what the kids are using. This slide shows a picture of the Juul and then another e-cigarette device. It's a little bit bigger than the Juul is, but it's still rechargeable by a USB port. The Juul is you plug in one part to the USB and then it kind of sticks out as a little antenna. Those are the two kind of most popular styles we do see among the students. And oftentimes when they first came out, they were like, oh no, it's just a USB drive, it's no big deal. And parents and teachers would be like, okay, it looks like a USB drive, must be that. Now we're a little bit more aware of that, but we're able to, it's still pretty popular. Nearly 1 in 5 students between 12 and 17 have seen a Juul used in school. Being in the classrooms across Kane County, we've seen and heard of students using e-cigarettes. They're either in the hallway, sometimes they're even in the classroom, the bathrooms. Some schools have started like locking down certain bathrooms during times because it has been such a problem. And part of the problem with these e-cigarettes is there's very little aerosol that comes out of them. So it's not like a traditional cigarette where you can smell it and you can see the smoke from it. These oftentimes have very little smoke that comes out of it, or they have a fruity scent, or they have different flavors. We'll talk about some of the other flavors too. But they're very hard to figure out what is going on at that point. E-cigarettes, just some basics about it. So usually they may look different than this picture, but they all have these components. So they have the mouthpiece, then that connects to the cartridge, which has the liquid inside of it. The atomizer heats the e-liquid. Usually there's like a coil in it that heats it up, and then that is what turns it into an aerosol. And then there is a battery component. Some of them are rechargeable, some of them you put different batteries in them, but for the most part, a lot of them are USB chargeable now. And so how does this work? Typical cigarettes use freebase nicotine, which is more on the basic side of it. When they go to change the nicotine into a liquid, they add benzoic acid into it, and it turns it into a nicotine salt, which makes it smaller, which makes it into a liquid form that they can then use with the e-cigarettes. So that's just a little basics about how they work. And in Kane County, we've been looking at the data. We use the Illinois Youth Survey, which is a survey that's done every 2 years throughout the state of Illinois. We have the data from 2018 and 2016. We're still waiting on 2020 to come out because the students were still being tested before schools were shut down. But as you can see, the 30-day cigarette-free usage rates for 10th and 12th grade students are pretty similar. They're around 98 and 96%. So that's for traditional cigarettes. When we look at the e-cigarettes, the numbers drop a little bit. So in 2016, 90% of 10th grade students reported being e-cigarette free in the past 30 days, and 81% of 12th grade students reported being e-cigarette free in the past 30 days. When we look at the 2018 data for King County, 10th grade, only 80% of the students report being e-cigarette free, and in 12th grade, only 72% of the students report being e-cigarette free in the last 30 days. Now, 12th grade usually has a little bit lower statistics with this because up until last year, it was legal for 18-year-olds to obtain tobacco. Well, they couldn't have it at school. They could have it outside of school. They could have it at home. They could have it at work, whatever. It'll be interesting to see what the data changes with 2020 and beyond because Illinois did pass Tobacco 21. And so seniors are not allowed to no longer can have access to those tobacco. There's a ton of different reasons why youth are using e-cigarettes. As you can see from this chart, there's some that are more popular than others. The most popular one is the friend or family member use them. Because they're influenced by their peers, their friends, it's really easy. They're about this big. It's real easy to pass it to the friend. It's quick, it's easy, and then it becomes a habit. Other reasons are pretty high up there, and then flavors. They're available in mint, candy, fruit, or chocolate. Mango was one of the most popular ones for Juul because it smells like mangoes, it tastes like mangoes. But they've since just stopped selling some of their flavors, and now they are only doing the traditional tobacco scented ones. However, there are still a bunch of other products out there that are scented. I've smelled bubblegum ones. We've purchased one that's like a Mountain Dew one. They are all varying levels of nicotine use in them, but they all are pretty attractive. Another high one up there is that the perception that they're less harmful than other forms of tobacco, such as cigarettes, which there's been a few studies done to see whether they are or not, and we'll cover one of them at the end of this. But there's still a lot of research that has to be done, and there's still a lot of long-term effects that have to be evaluated. These e-cigarettes have only been on the market since 2013 in the US, and so we're still waiting to see what some of the long-term effects are. The Surgeon General of the United States came out with a report on e-cigarettes about a year ago, 2 years ago, and marketing is a huge impact on students. As you can see from this little diagram here, e-cigarette ads reach nearly 4 in 5 middle and high school students. That's a ton of teenagers that are exposed to this. I know I've heard the ads on the radio of Juul about it being a quit smoking device. Juul actually got in trouble a couple years ago for marketing towards youth. So they've changed their tactics, and now they're seen as more of a quit smoking ads. But the ads are still out there, they're still exposed to them. Another big place where these e-cigarette ads are at gas stations or like the small convenience stores. Just like how they have cigarettes and traditional posters there, they have the same thing there for e-cigarettes. So where else do you think youth are seeing vaping ads? They see them at the stores, they see them, they might hear them on the radio. But one of the biggest areas that they see them are in social media. YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram. I would even add TikTok onto this. I'm not personally on TikTok, but from what I've heard from the youth that we work with, That's big one there as well with the videos. I have, yes. So these 3 were taken from my own Snapchat account with different advertisements and different stories that they have. This was back in November that I took these screenshots, but these were all within a couple of days of each other. Now, my stories are a little bit different than what our youth are seeing because clearly I'm not in high school anymore. But they're still there. It's still around. There's celebrities are using them. There's been a couple other celebrities that have been caught with pictures of them as well. And so some of the things are positive with them, some of them are negative. But social media is a huge influence on our teens. So a couple studies that have been done. One of them was, are e-cigarettes a gateway to smoking? And one of them, or this study said that there's moderate evidence that it increases the frequency and intensity of subsequent combustible tobacco cigarette smoking. There's still a lot of research going on during this, and they're still trying to find connections to see if it is, but we do know that the ones that are using e-cigarettes are typically different students than who would be using traditional cigarettes. So some of those, that perception that there's not as much harm to them, that perception that it's a safer thing, that it's flavored and it tastes good, those kind of attract different sets of students. And so it'll be interesting to see what the future studies come out with. We do know that nicotine affects the brain, and your brain continues developing until you're about 25, give or take a couple years. But nicotine is highly addictive, and it can harm your brain development. Young people's brains build connections pretty fast, so addiction can come a lot faster. There's been studies done with traditional cigarettes that show that if smokers who started smoking or while they were in high school are the majority of the adult smokers in the US. So it's not, they try and build that pathway early on to addiction, which can lead to further addiction later on. Again, it can lead to addiction. It primes the brain for addiction to other drugs, such as harder drugs like cocaine, opioid painkillers, marijuana. There is some connection between e-cigarettes and using them with marijuana, putting the THC extract in there, which I'll talk about in a slide or two. But we do call it a gateway drug. Nicotine has always been one. It can lead to other progression. Doesn't have to, but it tends to. Nicotine use can also lead to mood disorders, permanent lowering of impulse control. It can lead to disruptions in school, at home, and addiction. We have done some studies, well, not me personally, but there has been studies done from e-cigarettes about the aerosol that is exposed. When e-cigarettes first came out a couple of years ago, when I first started at Renz, it was, oh, e-cigarettes are safer because it's just a water vapor. There's no problem with that. There's no consequences. It's just water vapor. It's safe. Well, they've done a bunch of studies, and they found these different particles in it. So they found nicotine in it. They found cancer-causing chemicals. They found heavy metals. They found flavorings. They found other things. The vapor that's exposed is not really a water vapor like what you get from a humidifier. It's actually an aerosol. So if you think of what comes out when you spray a hairspray bottle, that kind of texture, that's what the aerosol is. It also, some of the juices are advertised as zero nicotine or low nicotine. However, we did get some for our show and tell that we can do. And I ordered a zero nicotine thing, but then it said it was 15 milligrams still. So they're advertised as one thing, but they're still found to have nicotine in them. These are just 42 chemicals that have been identified in e-cigarettes. The red ones are the ones that can be emitted in secondhand smoke that they found. And then the check marks are that are especially harmful to health. A lot of these are found in secondhand smoke or in traditional tobacco cigarettes. But then there's also other ones like acetone. nickels in there. I mean, there's a lot of chemicals that are out there. In regards to lung injury cases and deaths, so before the whole COVID thing, last fall, so fall of 2019, there was a big increase in cases of lung injury cases. This was called EVALI, or electronic cigarette or vaping product use associated lung injury. These cases have been reported from all 50 states and 2 U.S. territories and the District of Columbia. In total, by February 18th of 2020, there were 2,807 cases of this. They have stopped tallying it as of February, partially due to the COVID and partially due to the number of cases was decreasing because they had figured out a few things about it. They had found out that EVALI was most likely caused in part by the vitamin E acetate that was found in some of the off-market products. There were 68 deaths that were confirmed, and there were 2,000 hospitalized patients, which they used the data, or they had data on what substance they had used. 82% of those reported using THC-containing products. 33 reported exclusive use of THC-containing products. So THC is that marijuana extract. So those were altered, they were off-market pods that they were using that had the vitamin E acetate in them, and that's what caused it. However, 57% of these 2,000 hospitalized patients reported using nicotine products, and 14% reported exclusive use of nicotine-containing products. So not all of the cases can be attributed to the vitamin E acetate, and so they're still doing research. They're still trying to figure out what is going on. This map shows the number of hospitalized EVALI cases. I know a big one was popularized, I believe it was out in Colorado. But if you look here, the number, the green is the highest cases with 249 cases, and Illinois is one of those. So we did have a lot of cases working with the local hospitals. Sherman Hospital had reported that they had several cases of this as well. According to the Journal of American Medical Association, 9% of students reported using e-cigarettes, and those who used e-cigarettes were 3.5 times more likely to use marijuana than those who do not. Looking at the Illinois Youth Survey data, that number increased in the past, or in 2018, and it was a little bit higher with those who would use marijuana, but it still is possible. All right, so e-cigarettes on school property are still not allowed. They are included now in tobacco policies. They can be enforced by the administration. Each school is a little bit different on how they enforce these, but regardless, e-cigarettes are included in those and are not allowed on school property. Many school resources have devices that can test for the THC for that marijuana. And if they do find THC in those devices, it can increase the consequence, but again, it's determined by the school how they want to handle that. The FDA they issued a rule in 2016 where they were going to regulate all tobacco products, including e-cigarettes, because before that, they hadn't had the authority to evaluate them. But manufacturers are expected to, or were able to sell their products for up to 2 years while they submit their application, and an additional year or 2 while the FDA reviews them. The FDA, I have not seen any current rulings on it. I have not seen the regulation reports from anything. So a lot of the products that are out there are still unregulated, and the FDA has not approved e-cigarettes as a quit smoking device. So while people think it might be safer, a lot of times we hear, oh, well, it helps people quit smoking, so it's fine. It's a step in the right direction. It hasn't actually been approved for that. Yes, it works for some people, but it doesn't for everyone. Tobacco 21, like I mentioned before, Illinois passed Tobacco 21 last summer. So for the past 10 months now, it has been 21 in Illinois. And the federal law actually went into effect at the end of December to make it 21 across the United States. So before that, 29 states had approved it, and it kept increasing as it went. So what can you do about this? Giving you a lot of information, a lot of background information about e-cigarettes, but what can you do as a parent or as someone who's involved, someone who cares about someone who's using e-cigarettes? One of the biggest things you can do is stay educated. There are a ton of resources out there. Not all of them are as reliable as others, but things by the CDC are usually pretty reliable, and then that can lead you to other things. And providing information, talking about what you found out is important, because a lot of times, like I've said, a lot of times we hear students, oh, it's just water vapor, oh, it's safer, oh, it's this. Well, if they know the actual facts about it and they know some of the dangers, it might help stop the problem. Some subtle signs of e-cigarette use that you might see in your teens: frequent bathroom visits, dehydration. If you see, like in this picture here, that's what the Juul looks like when it's plugged in, where it sticks up a little bit. Some of them come out straight, some of them look a little different. But if you see an unfamiliar USB drive, check it out. I know, like, our phones all plug into the computer to charge, watches, everything, but know what that is. Sweatshirt to baggy clothes, sometimes they will put the e-cigarettes inside there. Either they will tuck in and then you can't see the smoke, or just it's easier to hide with that. Or if you suddenly smell a fruit, minty, or candy-like aroma, that could be a big sign. I know my cousin who's older uses e-cigarettes, and I walked by when they were nearby one time, and it smelled, I think it was Captain Crunch, it was very cinnamony, and I was like, where is this coming from? There's no breakfast food anywhere. It was from the e-cigarette. Some of them, like I said, give off, he was using one of the bigger tank ones because he was an adult user, so it gives off a lot more of the vapor, it gives off a lot more of the scent. Some of them, like the Juul, are pretty hard to find out, or you might just think it's an air freshener or gum or something. But just be aware if you suddenly smell that kind of aroma. So how can you talk about this? One of the biggest things that you can do is have 61-minute conversations. You don't need to sit down and have a lecture. You don't need to sit down and say, you know, for 60 minutes, oh, here's what I expect from you, here's what the consequences are, etc. Instead, you can have 61-minute conversations where maybe they're leaving to go to a friend's house and say, hey, have a good time. Just remember what our expectations are for this house. Enjoy yourself. Be safe. Doesn't even have to be a minute. Sometimes driving in the car is the best place to have those conversations because you're not having direct eye contact with each other. When you're both kind of focused on the road, it's easier to have those conversations. It's not as confrontational. It's kind of more of an organic conversation. Using data to back up your statements. So before you have one of these conversations, make sure that you're aware of the facts. So if your student comes back and says, oh, everyone's doing it, you can say, well, not everyone's doing it. In fact, 80% of the kids aren't doing it. 85% of the kids aren't doing it. You can say it's not safer and this is why. But having some data to back you up instead of just saying because I said so is going to help that conversation. There are a couple of resources available to you as well. If you are interested, you can text Ditch Juul to the number listed here. That is from the it's not that. But they have one available for parents as well. Once you text that, it'll give you the option if you're the student who's trying to quit, or if it's a parent or loved one or friend that you're trying to help. It'll give you that option and kind of give you some resources to walk through. However, unless the student is willing to quit and wants to stop using, there isn't going to be any change. If you force them into therapy, if they are unwilling to change, that's not going to happen. It has to be that person that wants to make the change. Oftentimes, if you call a counseling center, the person screening will say, hey, can I talk to the person who this is for? And then they'll ask, is this something you really want to do? Is this something that you're being forced to do? And then they might say, well, call back when you're ready. The Illinois Tobacco Quit Line as well, they have now developed e-cigarette and vaping quitting help as well. So they have some resources on their website. Those are sometimes geared more towards the adults, but they are working actively to get to a teens one. All right, so that is the end. These are our two websites. So rencenter.org, you can reach out there or look there for different resources. cshealgin.org, they also have a ton of resources. They almost have more, I think, than Ren Center. They have a whole section on how parents can talk to their students. They have a section on students, but that's a good place to go for resources. The number listed here is for Ren's treatment center, so you can give that a call and find out some more information. Otherwise, my email address is listed, my supervisor's email is listed, or you can find out more contact information for us at rencenter.org.
Thank you so much for all that information, Jessica. We have a couple of questions that were submitted ahead of time that I thought we'd go over. I know you've talked about a lot of this information already, but I thought I'd just touch on a couple of these. One of the questions was, vaping is a healthy version of smoking, correct?
It is not. There's mixed studies out there that have said, oh, it is safer, it isn't safer, but they're finding more and more studies that say that there's almost as many chemicals in it. And with vaping, one of the little jewel pods that's about this big is equivalent to a pack of cigarettes with the amount of nicotine in it. So while it may seem like a safer thing, there's been studies that say it's not. Also with the vapor that comes out, it's not a water vapor like they thought. It is an aerosol, so it's still damaging for your lungs.
Okay. Is there a legal age for vaping?
Yes, it is 21. So it falls in with other tobacco products. However, it's pretty easy for the teens to get these online, or there are some stores that will sell without an ID still. But online, all you have to do is go to the websites and then hold up a picture of your ID, get your credit card from your parents' wallet while they're sleeping, and then you can have it. Before we were all stuck at home, it was pretty easy for kids to go check the mail before parents got home and get these products in. Now that we're all home, it might be a little bit more challenging, but it's still a possibility. It still can happen, and it's really easy to get online.
Okay. And the last question we have, is vaping addictive?
Yes. I've heard, so anecdotally, I've heard from students who say they have to use in the morning when they wake up, and then they have to start using during school. They can't go through the whole day. If someone can't get through 8 hours of school without using these, that means there's an addiction problem. We've also seen with nicotine, there's a ton of research with nicotine in general that it's one of the most addictive chemicals. And so nicotine is in these cigarettes. A lot of times, even if it says it's low nicotine content, it isn't. So there's still nicotine in there. That is one of the common misperceptions that students had, where they're saying, oh, well, there's no nicotine in it, it's just flavoring, it's fine. There's very few places, like Juul doesn't make any pods that are 0 nicotine. So if they make refillable ones, there's a chance it might be 0 nicotine, but there's no way to check that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jessica, so much.
Do you want me to go to the next one?
Yes, please. All right. When I had originally planned Family Matters sessions, it was going to be in person, and it was going to include a dinner and a family activity. As I can no longer do it, we're going to be doing a prize online instead. So send me a picture of your family eating dinner together, and this is going to serve as your entry into just a small little raffle we're doing, okay? On the next slide, you're going to see my business card. I am the social service coordinator for all of Carpentersville. So if you ever have a social service question or a need here in town, please feel free to reach out. My website information is also on the website. We're here to help. Just reach out and let us know what you need. All right. Thanks. Have a great day.